What's up, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. Know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand, so find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Cam Smith riding with my guy, Bulls insider, KC Johnson. KC, look, we have a lot to unpack with this conversation in this episode, so I'll skip past all of the, the setups and how great you are, because it is true that you are great. But let's get into this conversation with this Bulls team, because as we record this podcast on Thursday, January 16th, we're looking at a team that is coming off of 3 straight losses. The previous 2, I mean, you can throw Sacramento's loss into that situation, but the previous 2 were some of the tougher losses that we've seen this year, especially when you go back to the previous loss of the Atlanta Hawks inside the United Center, where it was a guess who type of situation with the Atlanta Hawks roster with 4 of their 5 starters out. But they weren't playing like they had 4 of their 5 starters out. I mean, this is one of the better performances that I've seen from an NBA team when it comes to not having starters or key or star players in, and they just handled business against this Bulls team. So I'll just throw that out there, and then let's just flow from it from there, because, again, there's a lot to unpack.
Well, it's funny because, I mean, the Sacramento loss to me was excusable. I mean, it was a competitive NBA game. Both teams played at a high level, or pretty high level, and, emotional day, and DeMar does what he does in the fourth quarter. But the last 2 losses are, to me, inexcusable. I asked Billy Donovan pointedly in the postgame following the Atlanta loss, I mean, did you see enough effort out there? I mean, there are times to me following turnovers where they just weren't sprinting back on defense. And, look, we both been around the league a long time. Anybody can beat anybody on any given night. I don't get too hung up on, a two-way guy beats you, but separate. I mean, you're in the NBA for a reason, but separate that, just get down to the effort. And I know we're going to get into the post game. I mean, you got Nikola Vucevic talking about, things that he sees in terms of effort that are not even game plan things. And so a lot to unpack here. And, it's funny because I've started doing this video mailbag series for our website and YouTube channel. And one of the questions last week was, could you maybe see the Bulls becoming buyers at the NBA trade deadline because they've been playing so well lately? And after these 3 straight losses, I mean, I don't see how, you can answer that question. And I answered it even then, that I see them being sellers, and, this homestand now is only reinforcing that. This is a team that knows it needs to get out of the middle, and losses like the last 2 nights only underscore that with an exclamation point.
Yeah, no doubt on that, KC. So before I get into just, replying to your thoughts on what we saw last night from the Bulls against the Atlanta Hawks, for everybody listening right now and watching right now, make sure you tap in with KC with the mailbag, get your questions out there. Like he says, he's going to check his mentions here and there. He rarely does it, but he's doing it for the people, and that's why KC Johnson is one of the best. So make sure you try to tweet KC and try and get those questions out to him, but then also, watch his episodes as well on YouTube under the CHSN page there, the Fast Break. I love what KC is doing, man. And I think for what we saw last night, and I did not think, what I believe from what we saw last night was a situation where the Bulls come into this ball game and they see Trae Young out, DeAndre Hunter, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Ricochet, Larry Nance, like the list goes on and on and on of the amount of players that were out for the Hawks. And I think it's human nature, Casey. I mean, you play ball, I play ball as well, where you say, okay, well, we can kind of cruise into this situation. And we heard from Billy postgame saying that they don't have the luxury to just come into these ball games and just think that they can just give out half effort. And this is not a direct quote or quote for Billy on this one, but just more so my thinking, and kind of paraphrasing what he said, was just saying that, they just can't give out half effort and think that, oppositions and teams are just going to lay down for them. They still have to require the same energy, the same focus to try and get those wins. And we were talking about the last 3 losses. It's a common theme with this Bulls team. It's the turnovers, it's the lack of rebounding, and, of course, them not making shots. But last night was, to me, and Kendall Gill, who I was doing the postgame with on Bulls Countdown Live, was saying that was the worst loss of the season for this Bulls team. And you would think that coming off the previous matchup against the Hawks, where the Bulls were up 21 points in the third quarter in Atlanta, the Hawks come back and score 50 points in the fourth quarter. I don't care if Trae Young or the starters are on the court for Atlanta coming into this ballgame last night. You still want to send a message to the Hawks that say, all right, not only were we going to pay you back for what happened in Atlanta, but then also, too, you never know how, as you move forward towards the end of the season, how these losses and these head-to-heads start to play a role into possible play-in position or things further. So it's just interesting from that standpoint of how this Bulls team entered the ball game last night, but then also how they just continue to just not have the same effort as they should have before.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, Cam, I mean, like, not only did Billy Donovan say that post-game, he said it pre-game. I mean, he talked about how we can't expect to go into any game thinking we can just walk in and beat anybody. So not only did he say that to us pre-game, he said it to his team pre-game. So that makes to me, the loss even worse. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the worst loss of the year too. And you bring up the season series. I mean, the Bulls had a chance to clinch the tiebreaker there and win that season series. So if you are getting into a play-in situation, you know, that certainly comes into play.
Yeah. And watching Billy and listening to Billy in that post game, he was very passionate of what he was saying. And so obviously cleaning it up because he's doing his press conference, but you can kind of get an idea of the energy that was felt from Billy addressing the players and what the situation was in the loss against the Atlanta Hawks last night, KC.
I'm going to turn the light back on while you keep talking.
I was going to say, like, it feels like since we're having this conversation, like it's kind of like a morbid, dark conversation about this Bulls team. So it felt like I was going to get like evil KC right now when the lights turned off.
I didn't realize it was a timer room, man. I'm in like in the interrogation room here. But hey, that's what Bulls basketball can do to you sometimes. So
there you go, man. Look, as you like you said, you're in the interrogation room. It feels like you're getting your one phone call and you're using it to be on the By the Horns podcast. So we appreciate it, KC. No, but you get an idea of just, you know, what was said in the locker room from Billy, just how he addressed media members, but then also hearing from Kobe White post-game as well, of how he said that, you know, it was Nikola Vucevic that was doing all of the talking to players and just saying that they can't continue doing the same things, whether it's miscommunications on ball screens and just lack of effort and also rebounding.
Yeah, and, you know, some people say like that was a bad postgame. I don't think it's a bad postgame at all when somebody pulls back the curtain like that, and Kobe is as transparent as he was. I mean, and here's why I don't think it's a bad thing. To me, this season has featured different people leading at different times, and I think that's a good thing when your team has multiple people that are comfortable enough to stand up and say it. I mean, I remember Kobe White after one of the home losses earlier in the season when they lost. I don't even remember which game it was, but they were down by 30 or whatever. And he took the lead in the post-game locker room there. You've heard teammates talk about Zach LaVine growing as a leader this year. So, you know, last night it was Vooch who just kind of hit his breaking point. And I have no problem. You know, I was the one who asked Kobe, like, what was the coach's message in the post-game locker room? And he said the coaches didn't have to say much because we took over. And the fact that different people are speaking up, number one, to me, talks about a team that's connected. Number two, it talks about a team that cares. And number three, I have no problem with a player being transparent and sharing that with the media. So it's certainly notable, and we're here talking about it. But I don't think it's like, oh, my God, you know, Nikola Vucevic went off on his teammates. No, because first of all, he held himself accountable. And he talked about this is not game plan stuff. This is effort stuff. This is dumb stuff. This is controllable stuff, boxing out on a rebound, sprinting back in transition defense. That is way beyond X's and O's. That's way beyond game plan stuff. That's about just, you know, stuff that you can control and you can fix. And I have no problem with a teammate or any player reaching their breaking point and voicing that forcefully in the post-game locker room. That's what, you know, that's what team sports are all about. That's particularly what professional sports are all about. I mean, these guys are getting paid obviously a handsome wage, and fans deserve better than what they saw last night at the United Center.
Yeah, I'm with you, Casey, and I love that Kobe was very transparent and just his thoughts of what happened in the locker room, and just took it from there, right? I mean, he just went on an entire just kind of solo kind of discussion on what was going on, what was being said, but again, not pointing fingers, right? And I think that's the great thing about this Bulls team is that they're not pointing fingers at other guys. They're always saying that we have to do this better as a team, or we have to rebound the ball better, or we have to defend better. Not saying that this particular group or this particular person has to do that. And it wasn't any fluff with that answer with Kobe as well. I mean, for people that were saying that, oh my gosh, Nikola Vucevic just, you know, went off on his teammates in the locker room. It's basketball. It's a team sport. And if you're not holding your teammates accountable, then it's just an even nastier situation. And I love that Kobe pointed out that you're daily, KC, and we know this with you, that you're on the beat, you're around this team at practice, shoot-arounds, at games, traveling with the team, and making sure that you're getting the heartbeat and feeling the pulse of this group. And the chemistry is there with this group. And Kobe was saying that the chemistry is there. So if you have that, you have the respect, and you have that chemistry, then there's nothing wrong, especially on a night like the last night against the Atlanta Hawks, where you say, you know what? We have to be better. I'm going to hold you accountable. But first off, I'm going to hold myself accountable before I start saying we have to do things better. And I think that's a good, as you mentioned, peek behind the curtains of how this team operates and really the positive characteristics that they have with each other.
Absolutely. And like I said, to me, different voices speaking up at different times, to me, it's a sign of, I remember Tom Thibodeau used to talk about wanting a team with multiple leaders. And you've heard about Ayo and Kobe growing into a leadership role and organizing those off-season workouts in Miami. Yeah. And Zach has come back and talked repeatedly about being at peace this year after a turbulent injury-marred season last season. And, Vooch is definitely as you say, my job is to be inside the locker room and know the pulse of the team. And Vooch is definitely more of a chill guy. He's a little bit more of a mild-mannered guy. I mean, he's obviously at times got a encore temper and swears in Serbian and sometimes gets technicals for doing so. But behind the scenes, he's a very agreeable, likable, chill guy, funny, observing. And for him to be that upset with what he saw last night, this is not a team that's splintering. It's a team that cares. And you could also say, why is that care not showing up in the effort on the court? And that's certainly a valid question, and one that, we asked Billy Donovan about in the post-game media session. So they've got some things they need to correct. I agree with you that they took the team lightly, and, both teams were finishing a back-to-back, but Atlanta had to travel. So their back-to-back is tougher, and they're shorthanded and the Bulls are not. So I'm right there with you and Kendall saying I think last night, as bad as the loss in Atlanta was on December 26th, I think last night was worse.
Casey, we played a lot of basketball in our time, man. And so if the teammate that is really mild-mannered and kind of, quiet to a certain extent on the team speaks up and voices his opinion and does it in a way where you're like, damn, okay, if Casey is stepping up and saying that, then we need to get our stuff together. Or if Cam is stepping up and saying that, we usually don't expect that from Cam. Well, he's fed up, and also we need to get better, right? But also it's the respect factor that everyone has for Vooch and what he's accomplished individually, and also what he's been able to do with his Bulls team. So that's where, again, it holds even more weight when you have Vooch stepping up and saying that. So I'm with you, Casey, 100% on agreeing on that. And speaking of one of the leaders of this Bulls team, we saw him come back last night, Ayo Dosunmu, who missed the previous 10 games with that calf injury. You reported to me and Kendall during Bulls Countdown Live before the game started that he was going to be on a minutes restriction, 24 to 26, according to head coach Billy Donovan. Played 25 minutes last night, 9 points, a few assists, a couple of rebounds. But there were early on some moments with Ayo where you're looking at him race down the court, and it was just Ayo being Ayo, attacking downhill and scoring. And you're like, yeah, that calf looks okay to me.
100%. And I actually hung around Steve Gardner, our longtime photographer, and I hung around after the rest of the locker room cleared out and talked to him on camera about how he felt. And we saw with our own eyes, and then he voiced what we saw. I mean, he was the same old Ayo to me. I mean, he had two drives where it's just like, okay, that's the downhill Ayo that we know. I think he looked explosive. I think he looked totally fine. I mean, he did talk to Steve and I about needing to get back into game shape, obviously, a little bit when you miss 10 games. That's significant, but I thought it was a very seamless return, and I can see Ayo being as young and spry as he is, although he will be turning 25 tomorrow. I think being as young and spry as he is, I see that minutes restriction lifting pretty quickly, perhaps as early as this West Coast trip. So, great return for Ayo, and I know the Bulls certainly need his two-way contributions out there.
Man, Casey, you just hurt my heart when you said that Ayo's turning 25 tomorrow, because I remember Ayo when he was a freshman at Westinghouse High School. I'm just like, man, gosh, Ayo's 25 now? I have to look in the mirror and okay, how many gray hairs do I have now?
It's funny you bring up Westinghouse, because the players were giving me a hard time last night. It was this is a little peek behind the curtain. Modest, Kobe, and Ayo were the only ones left in the locker room, and they were quizzing me. And Kobe asked me, where did I'll go to high school before Morgan Park. And I'm like, I don't remember, man. and you should have been in there in the locker room with me.
I'm sorry, Casey.
And then Modest was asking me all the different high schools he went to. I was like, I don't know. You went to Hinsdale Central, then you went to some boarding school out east. Didn't you go to IMG Academy? I was grasping at straws. So I was drowning in the Bulls locker room, and you were not there to save me, Cam. So
man, Casey, you know what? Charge it to my head and not my heart, man. I was fighting on the things with Kendall Gill for the Bulls post game live. And you know what? Next time, Friday night, I got you, KC. I'm showing up to the locker room, and I'm like, hey, don't you come at KC. You best not miss because his boys here waiting to hold him down. So I got you, KC. So Ayo, Kobe, and Modest, you're putting on notice right now, man. I'm going to come at you guys and quiz those guys.
Yeah, the best part is then I Googled it and said Westinghouse, and as I walked out of the locker room, I said Westinghouse. They're like, you just Googled that? I was like, yes, I did.
Casey's like, ain't no shame in my game. So what? I had to find out. So this is going to be something that's going to be in my mind. So let me just go ahead and get that answer for you guys. But speaking of Modest, it's an interesting situation, and Billy Donovan was asked about this when it comes to the future of this team, especially one Patrick Williams. And we've heard Billy say before, KC, that he doesn't believe in entitlement minutes when it comes to players. But when you look at Patrick Williams, and he's had some bright spots this season, it's come in certain spurts, but overall the production isn't matching the role that he has with his team in terms of being a starter and the amount of minutes that he's playing. So the conversation, the question that I have for you, when you have a night like last night, especially with Modest Vucevic, who scored 8 points and also had 3 blocks. I mean, defensively, we're seeing Modest grow continuously with what he's been able to do, especially with how he's defending the rim and also blocking shots for drivers. But then Julian Phillips, who had 10 points and was not having plays run for him in Phillips, but just found a way to attack the offensive glass, got a couple of tip dunks, moving without the basketball on the baseline, and just finding a way to impact the game. So when it comes to this entitlement minute conversation with Billy Donovan, how is Patrick Williams being able to dodge that bullet when it comes to entitlement minutes? Because it feels like with this team, in my opinion, he's the poster child when it comes to entitlement minutes.
It's a fascinating debate. I'm glad we're getting into it because first of all, there's so many levels to come at this with. The first I'd start with is like we've asked Billy Donovan multiple times if he's considering a lineup change, and he's been consistent with saying no. So let's start there. I mean, then you cannot have this discussion without bringing up the fact that Patrick Williams is in the first year of a 5-year deal. And so you are married to this guy now, and so you've got to try to make that work. You can also couch it that arguably he's the best defender of those three. And certainly, although I think he's taken a little bit of a step back defensively this year. I do think he was a little bit more aggressive last night. Obviously got into double figures for only the second time this month. He's certainly in a slump right now. And I saw the same game you did, Cam. I mean, I saw Julian Phillips come in and impact the game instantly in his minutes without plays being called for him and doing exactly what Billy Donovan said he wants to see from Patrick Williams in his pregame remarks, and that's to feel you on the glass, feel you in transition, feel you at the rim, feel you defensively with your activity with your hands. You can impact the game without having plays called for you, without being a number one option, and with Patrick Williams' physical gifts and his physical body, that's what the Bulls need to see more consistently. Then you throw Modest into the mix, and I'll be brief here, but I personally was surprised that Billy did not go back to Modest until the fourth quarter, given how productive and active his first half stint was. So, look, Billy's been talking about this from the jump. There's a lot there in terms of development when you're talking about those three forwards, all young, all crucial to the future. He's juggling a lot. I'm not trying to absolve anybody of blame because they get in pro sports, you got to figure it out, but it's certainly something we can talk about probably pretty much every episode of the By the Horns podcast because it's going to be a storyline all man.
Yeah, for sure, especially with Billy saying that he's not changing any lineups, so it just makes it interesting for those guys and Phillips and also Vucevic, who in my opinion have an advantage coming off the bench because they can see what Patrick Williams and the evil KC's coming on again, man. The lights are going out. You get a workout right now too, KC. With that,
you gotta hold down for me. Sorry, YouTube viewers. It's fine for the podcast. For those listening, you don't have no idea what's going on, but I'm in a room that's obviously got I'm like in a tanning salon or something. What's going on here? Anyway,
Casey's on the timer right now. Yeah, no, I was saying that with Phillips and also Buzelis who are coming off the bench, and at the end of the day, this is a team. So I'm not going to say this and say that Modest or Julian Phillips are wishing anything, bad on Patrick Williams and wanting him to play bad. But they're looking at Patrick on the floor and really looking at all players on the floor and seeing, okay, when I get my chance on the court, how can I impact this game? Okay, we're not really attacking the offensive glass. Of course, they're on the bench, so they're hearing Billy Donovan. They're hearing the coaching staff say, hey, be aggressive, attack the glass, help, rotate, like different things like that. So as they're checking in, I'm sure that message is being replayed in their head, and they have their target right away is attacking the glass like we saw Julian Phillips did. And he was outweighed by guys like Onyeka Okongwu and also Clint Capella, still mixing it up and making himself a factor in there, Casey.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, his activity was noticeable, and so was Modest's really. I don't see Billy making a lineup change. I think, Patrick, to me, was more aggressive to start the season before he missed the 10 games with that, repercussions from his foot surgery. Yeah. He's told me multiple times he's fully healthy now. He's really struggled this month. I did my pre-tip hit on it last night for the broadcast. 6.3 points entering last night, 3 rebounds per game in 7 January games. Again, he did hit double figures against the Hawks, but it goes beyond statistics for him, and it's just you got to see him play with more physicality. I mean, he's not getting the line much. Yeah. So, man, it's certainly you certainly like to see him be a force more consistently, and I know that's what the Bulls paid him for, and they want to see it too.
I mean, we say this time and time again with Patrick Williams, all of the physical tools are there. The height, the weight, the size, the strength, it is there. He just has to get that out of himself. I mean, Casey, I'm not sure if you remember this movie. I'm sure you do because you're tapped in. But The Last Dragon, Bruce Leroy, when he's battling Sho'nuff and he finally realizes that he's always had the glow inside of him, and they finally facing off against Sho'nuff, and the orange aura just shines all over Bruce Leroy. That's what I'm waiting for Patrick Williams to realize, that he has it in him. He just has to tap into that inner chi and make sure that he can impact this game, because again, all of the physical tools are there. So it's interesting to see what version of not only Patrick Williams shows up Friday night against the Charlotte Hornets, but what version of the Chicago Bulls shows up against this Hornets team, who has played the Bulls tough, especially when you go back to the game in Charlotte where the Hornets forced overtime and the Bulls had to play some extra basketball to get out that win. But you have Lonzo Ball, who will be available on Friday night to play against LaMelo. I mean, it's very rare. It's like a solar eclipse or something like that happens whenever we get LaMelo and Lonzo on the court at the same time, because obviously Lonzo not playing the back-to-back. So we saw him Tuesday night against the New Orleans Pelicans, and shot looks really, really good. I feel Lonzo with that wrist looks very healthy, and I'm sure he's looking forward to playing against baby bro LaMelo on Friday night, Casey.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on with you on the pregame show. I mean, they've only played 3 times against each other in 5 years. Lonzo's been in the league 8, but his brother's been in the league 5. It's only happened 3 times, and only once when Lonzo's on the Bulls. So I personally am looking forward to seeing it. I know Lonzo loves the competition as well. And LaMelo, clearly is having a huge season when he's been healthy. And you can just see the Bulls when Lonzo doesn't play, how much they miss him. I mean, his absence was notable against Atlanta. I mean, I'm not absolving the rest of them for not playing well, but Lonzo brings so much and so much unique in terms of his energy, his IQ, his athleticism. So it's going to be a fun night, Friday night. And look, it's season-long 5-game homestand. It started off well. You had an opportunity to really make hay against some, on paper, not great opponents, but you got to try to salvage a 2-3 homestand with a win Friday night.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, again, that's why it'll be interesting to see what version of the Bulls shows up Friday night. And I hate to kind of be the guy that say, okay, well, if they would have gotten the win against Sacramento and the Pelicans and also the Hawks, this team would have been above 500. And now you're talking about, okay, now that changes their position in the Eastern Conference where they're a little bit closer to the top six because it's so jumbled in the East, especially when you look at, 5 through 10, 6 through 10, right? So I don't want to be the kind of guy that goes back and does that, but you try and right the ship Friday night against the Charlotte Hornets and see if you can get right back on track. But if you need motivation and if you're on the Bulls team, like just replay that game against the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, Keaton Wallace had a career high. Daquan Plowden in his first NBA game, I believe those two guys combined for 46 points. If I'm not mistaken, KC with them and just had themselves a ball game. So that's the motivator heading back into a matchup against the Charlotte Hornets and really for the rest of the season. Whereas Billy said in postgame, the Bulls don't have the luxury to take an opponent for granted. Like it just can't happen.
Yeah, or you can replay Nikola Vucevic's speech in the postgame locker room.
See, I wonder if Vuce, cursed in Serbian too. Like as he's.
I asked him. I actually asked that question.
Oh, okay.
I said, did you speak? Because he said, look, someone asked, was it mellow or pretty angry? And he goes, it was probably middle of the road. I go, was it English or Serbian? I had to follow up. And he laughed. So.
Oh, man, because if it was Serbian, then Vuce was really, really mad if he starts doing that, as we've seen on the court when he's having some challenges out there. All right, Casey, before we get out of here, man, obviously a lot of people want to know, as we mentioned this earlier, when it comes to this Bulls team, as we get closer to the NBA trade deadline on February 6, 11 games before we get there, what do you see with this team? Because the situation is always fluid with them, and we've heard the comments from Billy and also just the front office about the future, and Modest is a part of that. So when you have guys like Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic playing all-star worthy basketball, do you see one or both of those guys being moved at the February 6th trade deadline or before that?
Yeah, I've been consistent with this. I mean, I said it on the fast break. It's like, to me, the Bulls are still open for business, and they're not going to make a trade just to make a trade, but they clearly are. Arturo said it to us way back on media day. We're not done. I mean, more change is coming. If you're asking me to predict, I do think Zach LaVine will be here past the trade deadline. But all it takes is, one scenario to develop where that changes. I do think there is more of a likelihood that Nikola Vucevic is moved. I think that's something that the Bulls, I think, internally feel confident there will be a situation where he can be moved. I also will say this, like the Bulls are ready to move if the right deal presents itself. And we all know what happens with the league is the league, especially in this new CBA, it kind of doesn't get serious until we get closer to the February 6th trade deadline. Right now, everyone's kind of dancing around each other. The real stuff gets now. Maybe they, again, everything's fluid. We're taping this on a Thursday. A phone call tomorrow could change things, and a deal could be made. But I personally see this: the Bulls are being as patient as they can, but they're willing to make deals. But I don't think things get super serious until we get closer to the February 6th trade deadline. And that's when teams really start showing their hand and getting down to the nitty-gritty. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, everything's fluid, but I can just reiterate this. In no scenario do I see the Bulls becoming buyers. To me, right now, they are strictly in sell mode. They know they need to get out of the middle. And with Vucevic and LaVine having the seasons they are, there's an opportunity for them to maybe make a big splash, and we'll see how if they're able to pull it off.
Definitely we'll keep our eyes on that situation with the Bulls ahead of the February 6th trade deadline. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand, so find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. I'm Cam Smith with my man KC Johnson. Make sure you tap into KC's Fast Break with the Chicago Sports Network on YouTube. My man is doing work as he always does. Great and one of the best in the business. But we'll see you guys later. Take care.